Hello, welcome to another episode of The Conscientious Biologist, Ben Gallagher. This video is on the importance of surface area to volume ratio and is suitable for GCSE level. Now, this is a really important key concept to understand in biology. So you don't specifically need to have watched any of my previous lessons, and it doesn't specifically lead on to any others of my lessons. This concept underpins a huge amount of biology, and it keeps on coming up again and again and again throughout the course. So it's a really important key skills one to watch. As always, if you enjoy watching it, if you learn from it and you like the style of delivery, please do click on the subscribe button at the end of the video. So surface area to volume ratio, I've just said it's vitally important, and we're just going to start this video by throwing up a bunch of questions, all of which can be answered when you understand the surface area to volume ratio. We'll come back to these questions at the end of the video, but I just want to show you them now so you can see how broad reaching this question and understanding of this topic actually is. So knowing this can help you to understand why cells are so small. Why is it so important that they're microscopic? Why are there so few big cells? There's hardly any cells that are even visible to the naked eye, and that's because of this surface area to volume ratio. Why are plant roots hairy? Why, when you look at a plant root and you look at it really closely, does it appear hairy like in the picture? How are cells provided with enough nutrients to survive and get by? Again, surface area to volume ratio. How do lungs absorb oxygen? How does bile help the digestion of fat, something from the digestive system? And lastly, even weirder, how do elephants stay cool? Now you look at all those questions, they're from totally different areas of the course. They don't really relate to one another, but all of them are underpinned by this surface area to volume ratio. So you must make sure you're really paying attention to this. I suggest come back to this video multiple times throughout your revision, just to keep topping up your understanding and see how many areas you can apply it to. So first off, let's think, why must these two things be thought of together? Why can't you just consider the amount of surface that something has and separately consider the amount of volume something has? Volume is kind of the size of an object, how much stuff there is inside, how much space. That's its volume. Its surface is just the stuff on the outside. Now, it's really important that you must consider these two things together. That's because they have very different functions, but those functions are really tightly interlaced. So first off, let's think about surface. Surface is for exchange. A surface of something is the point at which the one side comes into contact with the other side. For organisms like humans, it's something like our skin, where the outside world can come into contact with our internal body. So the skin's that barrier between those. So if we want something to get from the outside to the inside, it needs to go through an exchange surface. Now, I've thrown up an oval there to try and represent a cell. And if we look at where the surface is, it's that dark blue line around the outside. So that's where exchange can happen. And the exchange could be, as is pulsating on there, things moving in, or now as things moving out. But it's going to be collectively both of those things, stuff coming in and stuff going out. Now, if each one of those yellow arrows that I've drawn on that diagram there, if you look at the length of those arrows, let's say that is the distance the particles and substances can easily diffuse. So they can move that far, be it moving that far from the outside to the inside or that far from the inside to the outside. That's a normal kind of distance that they can easily travel. Okay, that means any of the liquid close to the surface of that cell is going to be able to move things out easily. It also means when things come in, they're going to get only into the bits of the liquid, cytoplasm if it's a cell, that are close to the surface. This oval that I'm drawing now, that area deep in the center of that cell, that's nowhere near the surface. So anything that's inside that yellow circle, that's not going to easily move out. But similarly, things inside that yellow circle won't be able to get things from outside because they're too far away from where those yellow arrows could easily bring things in. Okay, so we've got some space in the middle. Now that space is effectively the volume of the cell, the space that's within it. And volume is for storage. So you can start to see how these two concepts are linked now. In that yellow space there, we can store stuff very easily. It's far away from the surface, from those yellow arrows, so things aren't going to be pulled out. So anything that a cell wants to keep hold of, it can store it. If it's big and has got a lot of space inside it, you can tuck things away from the membrane where they're going to be lost. Now, to make a comparison of that, if I throw up there a much, much smaller cell, we've got the same shape here, we've just made it much, much, much smaller. If we use those same diffusion arrows, like the distance that things can travel easily from the inside to the outside, or vice versa, if I put those arrows on it, you can see that it's absolutely covered. There's things moving in and out of it all over, moving quite deep into that cell. So this cell can exchange things really, really quickly because the movement can get deep into the cell and they can pull things out from deep inside the cell, because deep inside the cell isn't very deep at all because it's very small. Okay, but that cell doesn't have a lot of space inside it. If I draw a little yellow circle on there, look, doesn't have a lot of space inside it for storage. So what we're effectively saying here is that the big cells, or big objects, this can apply to lots of things, are good at storage as they have lots of space inside away from the surface. Okay, so bigger it is, better it is at storing it because it's got space away from the surface. Small cells can do very rapid exchange, but they aren't very good at storage, as anything inside them will easily diffuse out because it's all close to the surface. You can't get away from that surface if the object is very, very small. Okay, for those of you who are a bit more mathematical, but actually this is just a really nice way to get the concept across, we're going to simplify things down to cubes. So look above my head there. You've got one cube up above me there. That's a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. So the surface area to volume ratio should be really, really simple for you to work out. All cubes have got 6 sides. Each side is just 1 by 1. So its surface area is 6. Its volume is going to be only 1 because it's only 1 cube. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. Okay, that means there's lots of surface relative to its volume. 6 units of surface relative to only 1 unit of volume. That means, if you think about what was on the previous slide, it's really good at exchange because it's got lots of surface, but it's rubbish for storage because there's virtually no space inside that cube that isn't close to the surface. So let's double things up now. And let's throw a cube up there that's 2 by 2 by 2. Now you might think, okay, yeah, it's still a cube, cube's a cube, so it would be 6 to 1, but it's not. Let's think about this, okay? If we're thinking about its surface area and volume now, think about its surface. Each side has got 4 squares, okay? So each is 1 by 1, each square, so that's 1, that's 4 of them, so that's 4, okay? You've still got 6 sides. So 6 times 4 gives you 24. So its surface area is 24. Its volume is based on how many of the little cubes make it up. So you count them, there's 8 there. So it's 24 units of surface to 8 of volume. Well, let's simplify that down. 8 goes into 24 3 times. So actually we can convert that and simplify that ratio down to 3 to 1. So compare it to the one above my head now. It's still a cube. We haven't changed the shape. We haven't changed the object. We've just made it bigger. And now it's got a volume of only 3, a surface area of only 3 relative to its volume. 3 times more surface than its volume, as opposed to that one that's got 6 times more surface. Now think about what that means. That means that that cube, the bigger one, has now got space inside it further away from the surface that is going to be good for storage. So that one is better for storage, but even though it's got a lot more surface, we know we counted it had 24 units of surface, it's obviously got far more surface than the first cube. Relative to its volume, it has less. Okay, so that one's better for storage, not as good for exchange. Let's jump it up once more now, just to really hammer this point across. Let's get a 3 by 3 by 3 cube here. Now, each side has got 9 squares on it. Again, you've got 6 sides, so that's 54 units of surface. Its volume is made up of 9 cubes in 3 layers, so we've got 27 cubes making up its volume. So now that's 54 units of surface, huge amounts of surface, loads of exchange can go on. But you've now got loads of space inside, well away from that surface, where exchange can't happen. Let's simplify that 54 to 27. You might be able to work out very quickly, 27 goes into 54 twice. So we've now got a surface area to volume ratio of just 2 to 1. Now you should be noticing a very obvious pattern here. The bigger the object gets, the bigger the cube gets, yes, the more surface it's got overall, but because its volume is getting so big, its surface area relative to its volume is getting less. So it has a much higher proportion of volume than the other cubes, lots of space away from the exchange surface for storage. Let's just really try and hit that point home. If I pulled the front off that cube, I've coloured the middle cube as red. That middle cube, you look at it, tucked away in the middle of that bigger cube. That red cube has no surfaces on the outside. So that red cube is a great place to store stuff. It's a long way away from the surface. That cube in the middle, that's the same as the first one, but now that cube in the middle, that red one, has 0 surface for exchange, meaning it's really good for storage. Let's pop that back on the front there, okay? Hopefully that all made sense. This is a great slide to take a screenshot of because this kind of summarizes surface area to volume ratio better than anything else can. So you might want to take a screenshot now. Now let's just play about with this for a minute. Let's just mess around with this concept because this is something that helps to explain lots of areas in biology. What would happen if we broke the big cube back into its small cubes? Now we know that big cube, I've put it down the bottom there, we know it was 54 to 27, which breaks down as 2 to 1. But if we broke that up, smashed it up into all 27 of its cubes, and trust me, there's 27 cubes here, I had to count them all out. Those 27 cubes are now just 27 of the original 1 cube that we had on the previous slide. So think, each one of those cubes now has got all of its surface exposed. One of these 27 cubes would have been the red one in the middle that had no surface exposed, but now because it's free with all the others, it's got all 6 of its sides exposed. So we've exposed more surface. Now, if you think about it, and I put that up on here, there's still 27 cubes. So the volume remains 27. That doesn't change. But now the surface area is 27 times the 6 sides, which is 162. It was only 54. You can see I've marked it in red over there. So we've gone from 54 to 162. Bit of quick maths, you might realise that 162 is triple 54. So just by taking that cube and cutting up into all its small cubes, we've tripled its surface area. Okay, now this is really, really important and relates back to one of the questions that was on the first slide. Okay, so we're back to the 6 to 1 ratio once you cut it all into individual cubes, as opposed to the 2 to 1 ratio that we had before. Now I'm going to give you one last example on this if you're still really struggling with it. This is one that I came up with a few years ago and it seemed to really help students because, like me, people tend to like things they can relate to, things that are a bit more interesting to remember. So this example is the icing on the cake. And I mean that quite literally because I'm going to talk about surface area to volume ratio in terms of icing on a cake. I'm a big fan of icing. It's my favourite bit of a cake. But if you consider a cake, if we just had one solid cake, okay, not a sandwich cake like the one that I've shown up here, one solid cake, we could put icing on the top only, okay? Ignore that we can put it on the sides. We've got one surface on top that you can spread icing on. That's a bit rubbish for me because I like my icing, okay? Now, if I took that same quantity of cake, that same cake, and I sliced it through the middle to make 2, well, what I've done, I've just created extra layers in there that I can have icing on top, and now I can have icing inside as well, because by cutting it, I can open it. I've created exposed surfaces that weren't exposed before. So by doing nothing to the volume, just by chopping it down, I've increased the surface area onto which I can put icing. But let's make it more like the one in the picture that I've got here. If we were to triple it, if we were to take still that same volume of cake and whack it into 3 layers now, I can have icing on top, I can have icing here, and I can have icing here. I can triple up on my icing. So what that means is a smaller volume equals a larger surface in comparison. Now let's jump back to those questions that we put up initially, and let's now try and apply some of that knowledge to these questions. So first off, why are cells so small? Well, we kind of answered this in the previous a couple of slides ago. If you've got a small cell, it can take things in and out really quickly and easily. Those things will be the nutrition that it needs to feed it to keep it going. And metabolic reactions, the reactions of life, are going on throughout that cell. If the cell was very large, any of those metabolic reactions going on in the middle wouldn't be able to get any nutrition, wouldn't be able to get any molecules or particles because they're too far away from the surface. But by keeping the cell small, all of the cytoplasm inside has access to the nutrients that are on the outside. So why are cells so small? To give them a massive surface area relative to their volume so they can get everything that they need. Why are plant roots hairy? They have root hair cells, that's large projections of membrane that increase their surface area whilst keeping the volume very small. Because root hair cells in the roots need to be able to absorb lots and lots of water, lots and lots of minerals. So again, increasing their surface without doing much to their volume. How are cells provided with enough nutrients? Well, it's capillaries that deliver the blood to all of your cells. Your heart sends blood out through an artery, which then branches out into millions of tiny capillaries. And capillaries are really, really small. The walls are 1 cell thick. Red blood cells have to travel through capillaries in single file. They're so small, meaning they have a tiny volume and lots of surface to give out the oxygen, give out the nutrients to all of the cells. How do lungs absorb oxygen? In your lungs, there are millions of tiny little air sacs called alveoli. Because there's millions of them, it's not just one big lung inside your lung, are these millions of tiny sacs. By having millions of tiny ones, they have an enormous overall surface area relative to their volume for exchange, getting oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. How does bile help the digestion of fats? Bile is a chemical created by your liver, stored in your gallbladder, and released at the start of your small intestine, a bit of the small intestine called the duodenum. That bile breaks down big lumps of fat into smaller pieces of fat. That process is called emulsification. Those small pieces of fat can then more easily be digested and broken down. So it's literally the thing that we looked at with the second slide on the cubes where we broke it down. That's what bile does to fats to make it easier to digest. How do elephants stay cool is a bit more of an interesting one, because we're not talking about the exchange of particles and molecules here. We're talking about the exchange of heat, but that's still a really, really important thing to be able to exchange. So think about this, because elephants are a little bit of a contradiction on this, apart from that they have one key feature that allows them to stay alive. Elephants live in very, very hot countries, generally. You've got African elephants in Africa, you've got Asian elephants, Indian elephants. This picture here are Bornean elephants. It's a photograph I took when I was on holiday in Borneo. But they're all very hot places. So think about that. If you're an elephant that lives somewhere very, very hot, you're likely to get very, very hot. Well, if you're really, really big, that gives you a lot of volume for storage. So you're going to store that heat inside you. If you're very, very big, you haven't got much surface relative to your volume to lose that heat. So if you're very, very big, somewhere very, very hot, you're going to find it very, very difficult to get rid of that heat, to pass it out, to exchange it from your body into the atmosphere. That's why a lot of creatures that live in very hot places tend to be small, to give them lots of surface to lose heat through so they don't overheat. So you might think, well, that's ridiculous. Elephants are enormous. Surely they should overheat. But elephants have got something to massively increase their surface area for them to lose heat. Ears, huge ears. Elephants have massive, massive ears. African elephants in particular, because it's so hot where they are. Those ears provide a huge extra surface to exchange heat with their environment and keep cool. So even something like animal physiology still linked to surface area and volume ratio. So please rewatch this if you haven't understood it. Mark it so you can come back to it and watch it at another time. It's such an important concept. It comes up again and again and again in biology. So as I said at the start, this presentation can lead on to many areas of the course, but if you haven't watched the transport through membranes lessons, those are the ones I'd suggest you go on to, because they link up very tightly to the exchange stuff that we've been talking about. You may want to jump straight to the respiratory system and look at the alveoli that we mentioned. You may want to go to the circulatory system and consider capillaries and what we talked about. You may want to look at the evolution and adaptation lessons, because they will link in surface area to volume ratio on cooling. There's so many areas that you could go to. So keep coming back to this as and when surface area to volume ratio pops up in the course. As always, if you've enjoyed this, please do subscribe to my channel. It'll keep you updated on anything new. And if you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Thank you.